What's something that you think is like wrong? Like racism. For
Yeah,
example.
good example.
Okay, it's obviously wrong to treat someone differently based on skin color or where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But that's not something people have always believed.
Right.
So if you're in a society that is, like, let's say you live a couple hundred years ago and there's like slavery widespread and stuff like that,
mm-hmm.
And a lot of racism and things of that nature,
mm-hmm.
Who are you to tell somebody else that racism is wrong?
Right, because in that time, in the society, it works.
Exactly.
And it's widespread, and
So,
people are like, this is the way.
Like that's one of those things that we know is like obviously wrong, but still it needed to be fought against
mm-hmm.
by a minority of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's similar issues today that people want to say, and I'm pretty sure this was a defense against like slavery, like, oh,
right.
don't apply your beliefs to me, let me own slaves.
Right. See, I don't know about that. That last comment, I don't know about that, but I get where you're coming from. So when you were saying that, I think there's problems like this today. For me, I think that is the religious community. I think the religious community versus the agnostics and the atheists, I don't have the statistics to back this up.
Yeah.
But I would say there's more people have fallen from religious lifestyle and are living an atheistic or an agnostic lifestyle now than there is that are true believers of whatever religion they see fit.
I think statistically that's correct.
Do you think that that is one of those issues that, like, the fight to wake people up, for lack of a better term, to the importance and the benefits you can get from religion is something that us as religious people have to fight as a minority right now for?
Yes.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So what I'm trying to get at is that fight for religion, that fight for the end of slavery, which has not ended. Slavery is still happening in parts of the world, which I realized that recently, and that f***ed me up, dude. I can't lie.
Yeah.
But those two fights, it's clear to me those battles need to be fought. You know what's not clear to me, if it's a battle that needs to be fought? Our political division. So we don't need to go into this huge widespread conversation about politics because you told me you're getting sick of politics. But what I don't understand is why people need to be tooth and nail with each other. I won't have Christmas dinner at this family's house because they support this person. That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think I would ever, well, I hope I would never reject somebody based on what they think.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you can't stand up for what's true and right and just.
Exactly.
Like, there's certain things that I believe are right that I'm not going to budge on.
Mm-hmm. As you should.
Yeah.
I feel the same way.
But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to have a conversation. I'm not going to, like, love the person with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that I'm going to stand for truth,
mm-hmm.
or what I think is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, this, I guess, brings us back, and we've already had this conversation, subjective versus objective moral truth, so you have to go listen to Daniel if you want to listen to us talk about that. But I think, for me, man, the biggest thing is being able to reconcile and acknowledge that I do not have the epitome of knowledge. I do not have the one truth.
Right.
I may have a truth, I may have my own truth, and I may be very steadfast in my truth because I've researched it. I put the time and effort into trying to understand it. But I can always learn something from one of you guys. For example, I can always learn more than I'm willing to admit from people I disagree with at all times. Because for me, that who am I to make this rule for all of society?
Mm-hmm.
It goes the same for me to say, who am I to say that this is right? Because the more and more life that I've lived, and come on, man, like, we're in our early 20s. It's not like we've lived a ton of life, but we've lived more life than a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And the more life I live, the more I realize I don't know what the hell is going on. Like, I genuinely don't know anything.
It's true.
Right? So if I'm taking my life a day at a time, trying to learn a day at a time, I think it's pretty... Ignorance is the wrong word, but it's the one I'm going to use. I think it's really ignorant for me to say, no, I got to sit here and tell people that I'm right and you have to listen to me. But that last comment you made, like, I also think it's a responsibility once you have attained knowledge to share that knowledge with other people. So to fight for what you know to be true, what you know to be just, you have an obligation to do that, in my opinion.
But didn't you just say that that's just like your truth?
Right. So that's what I'm saying. That's why I think it needs to be different. I think I have an obligation to fight racism because I know that to be objectively wrong.
Right.
But I can't walk around and tell people, you can't have dogs. You should all get cats. Because dogs potentially might bite people. Because dogs poop all over the lawns. Cats don't do either of those things. And when they do, it's a little kitty cat. You can protect yourself.
So there are things that are absolutely true and things that are subjectively true.
Right. And you need to be able to differentiate between them.
Facts.
And if you cannot, that is where we run into our issues, bro.
Right. There's things that are opinions and there's things that are facts.
Exactly. And opinions are like man. Everybody's entitled to your opinion. You're going to have one. But not every opinion needs to be vocalized.
Yeah.
And not every opinion needs to be supported, especially mass support.
Yeah.
So if we want to take like a hot example, for example, as a businessman and just as a person who is trying to make his country the most powerful and most seen in the world, I think Donald Trump objectively did some good things for the United States. Mm-hmm. But I also think subjectively, because who I am, I think he's poo. But that does not mean I cannot recognize America was a powerhouse before he got there. America was the most popular thing to speak about after he left. So I think when it comes to keeping his place on the world stage, keeping people talking about America, Donald Trump did a very good job. Okay? And I can objectively navigate between who he is as a human being and why I dislike him and what he could have potentially done good and bad for the country, because who you are, and this is the roundabout thing about this whole episode of values, at least in my opinion, who you are and what you value, they're a huge part of you, but that action and that intent, that's when people say actions speak louder than words. Mm-hmm. Facts, dude. Because without that action or that intent, you really just are another person who's doing a lot of talking.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions, unless you have something to add.
No, do you mind if we take a little break?
Not at all.
Go to the washroom.
Go do your thing.
Yeah.
While I have you here, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about something very important. First of all, if you haven't started listening to women rappers, you have to change that. Megan Thee Stallion is the greatest of all time. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I thought about this question while you were in the washroom, so I hope you're ready for it.
Oh, I'm ready.
Do you think that money is the root of all evil?
Oh, man. No.
No?
I don't know.
That's a tough
It's a
question.
little bit too much for me. Yeah, I'm not even gonna attempt at one.
Okay, what Tyler and Nick said is they think that greed is the root of all evil. And I think it's probably somewhere in between. Because I get where they're coming from. Like, if money didn't exist, there would just be something else that everybody is striving for.
Right.
But I think it's a facilitator of wrong action. So take this with a grain of salt, coming from a poor college student who is in serious debt to the government. I think there's a certain amount of money that you make where you get to make a decision, because I need to know more about income and livable lifestyles right now to make an educated statement about this. But let's say a 200K nest egg. You have a place to live. Let's say you own your own property. You have a 200K nest egg, and you're building towards your future. So you can still put money into your kids' college tuition every year. You have groceries on the table, you have light, you have water, you have internet, I guess. You have all the essentials. Then, I think you get to make a decision. Am I going to use my wealth to better the community, or am I going to use it to better myself and my people? And I'm not saying either or is the right decision, but I'm saying there's so many people in the world that need help where I physically cannot agree with just putting that in my pocket when it could go elsewhere. But that's just me. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I think hoarding money is wrong.
Yeah.
I think accumulating a bunch of wealth for no reason is just kind of silly.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. And, like, to each their own, right? Like, there's people who burn off steam and get the same fulfillment that we do, like hooping or working out or just, like, having these conversations with people from riding the stock market for 5 hours. Yeah. Starting with $500 and ending up with thousands of dollars. So, like, I get it. You're entitled to what you want. This is your life. Live it as you see fit. But I just think we all gotta help people a little more. That's all.
No doubt.
Is there anything, because there's some things that you said you were comfortable and you wanted to talk about. Now's the time. Is there anything that you want to ping into the void, put into this conversation?
Not really. I think we had a good conversation.
I agree. Yeah. I think it's been good. This is the last thing that I think is a good way to wrap up because we might be able to branch somewhere.
Okay.
So, because you said earlier that pleasure you don't think is inherently good or bad, which is fine. I can agree either to disagree or agree with you on that because I think that's a reasonable statement to make.
Yeah.
Do you think that the words good and bad have individual connotations in our vocabularies based on our lived experiences? Like, for me, if I lived in a society where I had to steal a loaf of bread every Friday to make sure my family is fed, then, like, on a stretch, I could say stealing when necessary is good. But I would also say, for example, happiness is good. Does that mean that my definition of the word good would be different than yours if you lived in a society where you never had to steal that bread? So then you would be like, no, stealing is always bad.
You're basically asking, like, how do we define good?
No, because we've already answered that question.
Yeah.
But do good and bad have movable definitions? Or is there just the one?
I don't think things that are bad can be made good.
I agree.
So I think if something is wrong and bad and evil, then it's you can't say that it's good or true.
I agree with you there. Like, you could never make pillaging a good activity. You're going into somebody's home, stealing their shit, raping their women, eating their food, and then disappearing. That's horrible. But I do believe that good has a much broader definition than people are willing to admit. So the reason I asked you this is because we were speaking about this earlier. I think you can be a good person, a morally correct person, living a righteous life, and still have people label you as not good or living wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can agree with that. You know what I'm saying? Because going back to what we said earlier, who are you to say that that is bad if it's just different? You know?
Yeah, and I mean, I have sympathy for the whole, like, cultural relativist movement.
Right.
Where there are things that are just different
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people have judged as bad in the past. So I can see, I have sympathy for that kind of thought. It's just, like, there are things that are bad, objective of culture or whatever.
And you can't get around them, you know? So, I think the last thing to wrap it up before we say goodbye, because the boys are going to try and eat chicken burgers, which I think is going to be super sick.
We're going to cafeteria.
That's okay. We'll see you in a little bit.
See you guys.
I don't think it's our position to tell anybody how to live. And I think we tried to make that as clear as possible from episode 0, is that we're just doing this because we're trying to learn. We're trying to find our own answers.
No doubt.
To these type of questions. But on the flip side of that, I just want to ask everybody to try and respect as many viewpoints and lived experiences as possible. Because I think the root of what Cale and I got to today, and you can say whether you agree with this or not, is that there are going to be objective moral truths and objective things that we value as good or bad. And whether you see the fall of religion, whether you're a theological person or not, that's irrelevant. But it's not your place to tell people, this is right, you're wrong, shut up. It's our place to say, this is what I believe, this is what you believe, let's have a conversation and try and learn from each other.
That's true.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Good stuff.
Thanks for joining us again, Cale. Come on, it was a pleasure.
It was fun.
Oh,
It's good.
I really hope you guys enjoyed this one, because we kind of went off a whim, but we also, like, these are things that we're thinking about, so it's not like we're just putting out random thoughts. So thank you very much for joining us for this episode of the Fork in the Road podcast, and we will see you when we see you. Come on!
Nice.
Let's go.